Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the hospitality industry during COVID, the presidential election in Pennsylvania, but first, schools are reevaluating how they open. As they say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, joining me to talk about particularly reevaluating the opening of schools is Jan Murphy. She's a reporter with a journalist with PennLive and Patriot News. Jan, as always, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Terry. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I want to tell you, there's so much controversy that has developed about how the schools should open up. I want to say this fall, but many of them are opening up before Labor Day, you know, in the third and fourth weeks in August. And originally, a lot of them are doing, well, we're going to do it in person and online. And now they seem to be shifting more online and less in person as the fears about COVID-19 spreads. And, you know, in many parts of the country and in many parts of the state, there's been this uptick that a lot of school officials are very concerned about.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that there is a lot of uncertainty and nervousness about the start of this school year. I think that superintendents probably wish it was only about, do we have enough teachers and school supplies? But yeah, we're seeing, particularly the urban school districts now are deciding to move to a hybrid, or not a hybrid, but an online model, you know, just start remotely and see how things play out. But I know Philadelphia and Pittsburgh have. Lancaster announced that this week, that they were shifting from a hybrid model to remote learning. And there's just so much uncertainty about how to open schools safely. In fact, that was a topic for some legislative committees this week. They met with school officials and were asking them, you know, what their protocols were, what happens if a kid shows up and tests positive. And, you know, I just think they're all very nervous. They don't know really how this is going to play out.
Yeah, and many schools and colleges are now saying they're setting up testing arrangements before COVID-19 testing before they'll let you on campus. And were lawmakers at all concerned about the spread of COVID into schools, or were they primarily just trying to get a sense from schools officials about what they're likely to do, or a combination of them probably?
Yeah, it was pretty much a combination. I mean, there is, you know, some serious questions about what are they going to do? I mean, you know, some schools are not doing the testing or the temperature checks when kids come in. And I mean, they're just really, and on top of all that are the teachers and the staff who are, you know, particularly those that have folks at home that are in the at-risk populations, that there's just so much nervousness. You know, teachers and professors, you know, at Kutztown this week, that's what the professors said, that they were, you know, really thinking that given the setup that the university has arranged for the opening in less than 3 weeks, they just think the safest thing to do would be to go to an online classes.
Yeah, I mean, my sense about this is that they could probably work out how they're seated in the classrooms, but once you change venues, you go to cafeterias where the kids intermingle, particularly at the elementary level. And boy, I'll tell you, when you get kindergarten and first and second graders, try to keep them away from each other. I mean, that's an almost impossible task. So maybe it's not so much in the classroom, although I understand why teachers and professors are nervous about it. But imagine the other interactions that take place.
Oh, the other thing that can't be ignored is this requirement to wear masks all day. And I wrote a story about cyber schools and how they're just seeing an explosion of kids wanting to enroll. You know, most of them, if not all, have waiting lists of people trying to get into them because parents, that idea of asking a little kid to wear a mask all day long or outside on the playground, I mean, you know, they just don't know how they're going to do it. But I mean, the other thing is that, you know, school districts have said, you know, the health department says everybody should be at least 6 feet apart. Well, some classrooms just cannot accommodate that. And, there's teachers that are being reassigned to try to reduce class sizes to, reassign from their normal duties just so that they can have smaller classes.
Yeah, great point. Did the lawmakers provide any real guidance? And actually, schools are saying they can't possibly make the changes they have to make, with increased protective equipment, with how they have to reorganize the way they do business, that they're going to need an additional appropriation. Any sense that the legislature is likely to do anything about that? There's some federal money available, but how about from state government?
Well, the school districts have been provided in the budget that was passed in May. They were provided their full year's funding that was at the same level they received last year. And we do have another second part of the budget that has to come into being by the end of November. And so I'm sure that they're going to be, hoping that there's some more money coming their way. But, that was another thing that came out at the hearings you mentioned about the PPE. School district said, we maybe have enough to get through, the first couple of months,
sure,
but certainly not for the whole year.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. We're out of time. We did not get to the Secretary of Education leaving. Maybe we'll take that up at another time, but thanks for doing it.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
All right, coming up, the hospitality industry during COVID. This is an important subject because it affects the economy of much of Pennsylvania. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, the hospitality industry during COVID-19. Joining me is John Longstreet. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Terry. I'm glad to be with you today.
Well, I'll tell you, the COVID-19 has had a huge effect on a number of industries in the state of Pennsylvania that have been losing business. I drive by and see a lot of stores, a lot of restaurants just simply not opening for a whole variety of reasons. And in the main, some of them are never going to reopen. So how has COVID-19 affected the restaurant industry that you represent?
Well, Terry, it's been devastating. Restaurants were the first shut down and will likely be the last that will fully open again. So it's had a dramatic effect on it. Restaurants don't operate on big margins anyway. They have about a 5 to 7% operating profit margin. So it's been really difficult. Initially, they were allowed to do takeout and delivery because they were an essential part of the food chain, but that represents in most cases 5 to 10% of the total revenue. So the challenge is getting them reopened so that they can do business. When we got them back up to 50%, and when the governor brought them into the green phase, there was a lot of hope. Restaurants were figuring out ways to survive, even only at 50% capacity. But at 25% capacity, where we went back to on July 15th, it's frankly, it's a death sentence for a lot of restaurants. Yeah. We have some real data that was created by by a national survey by Yelp about 10 days or 2 weeks ago. And in the data, it shows that 60% of the restaurants that close temporarily will close permanently. And as you noted, a lot of restaurants seem to be closed temporarily. We estimated during the initial phase of this, when they were only allowed to be doing outdoor dining, about 50% of the restaurants were closed in Pennsylvania. That would be, in rough numbers, about 12,500, 13,000 restaurants. If that happens again with the 25% capacity, which we believe it will, most restaurants don't think they can operate at 25%, so they're closing. or many will. If half of them close again, that means that up to 7,500 will close permanently.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, there's another concern, and this is more anecdotal than it is scientific. I hear a lot of my friends who say they're nervous about going inside, but boy, when I drive by a lot of restaurants that have outdoor service, it's packed. Are you finding that to be the case? That it may be the restrictions that are important. I'm not arguing against that, that you're not accurate about that. But it's also the fact that you have a lot of people that are just concerned about going inside right now.
Absolutely. There are two things that the restaurants have to be concerned about. It's government regulations and it's consumer behavior. Without a doubt, with all of the news about COVID-19, people feel safer being outdoors. That said, we believe, and I know that the governor's team originally and the health secretary believed, with 6-foot social distancing, face masking, and all the other restrictions that were put into place as far as constant sanitizing, that restaurants can provide a safe environment as well. The vast majority of the restaurants have been following those standards and provide safe dining. No doubt, though, Terry, a lot of consumers, if they have a choice, they'll say, give me a table outside.
Yeah, oh yeah. All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about another subject, and that is guidelines for opening up restaurants and what they mean. A number of restaurants aren't abiding by, and they're getting into legal problems, and we'll take that up after this break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
I'm talking with Jan Longstreet. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association, an important topic. It concerns a business that we all frequent, that is restaurants in the state of Pennsylvania. And you had are you getting any guidance from the state legislature about what to do, any additional resources? Where does all that stand?
Well, there's a couple of things that have happened. One, since the restaurants were reduced from 50% capacity to 25% capacity, the legislature has spent a fair amount of time trying to shed light on that subject, try to determine whether that's made restaurants any safer, which it's our contention it is not. And so the House Majority Policy Committee held a hearing on this. There's about 10 restaurateurs and myself who testified there. And the issue was all around 50% capacity. And our contention is with social distancing, which is part of the rules, and with face masking, that there's no difference in safety between 50% and 25% capacity, assuming the other rules are being followed. And consequently, the 25% makes it really difficult for restaurants to operate, at least on indoor dining. Really impossible.
What about any support? I mean, have you asked the legislature for support in terms of resources?
Absolutely. The legislature has a number of bills that they're working on, and one of them that's will be really helpful to the industry was sponsored by Representative Todd Stevens. It would create a $250 million grant for restaurants that can receive up to $50,000 each. This all comes out of CARES money that was already granted to the state from the federal government. It's not Pennsylvania direct taxpayers' money. There's another bill. There is a bill that would allow restaurants to operate at 50% capacity by Representative Everett. Our hope is that the governor will bring restaurants back to 50% capacity before that's necessary. I think that I know that he's worked with us very closely up until this time to try to have fair and balanced regulations. There's another one by Senator Stefano that provides liability protection, not just for restaurants, but for other small businesses, assuming they're doing all the right things. They're following all the CDC standards. And there's a few others there, too.
Is there any sense from the governor about relaxing these restrictions that he imposed a couple weeks ago? And maybe, parts of the state where COVID-19 seems to be under control, versus the places in the state where it's growing. Does that make any sense to kind of evaluate, to look at it from that way, or do you think it needs to be sweeping, you know, the going to 50% capacity across the whole? I think I know what you have to say.
Well, I will say that when the state was shut down, it was shut down county by county as counts got high. And when it reopened that way too. So there was some sense and logic to the governor, at least at that time, that it should be a county by county issue. That said, we believe that the 50% is no different than 25%, except it's restaurants out of business at 25%. And I believe that the governor is thinking about that. We've worked with the governor throughout on the other standards. We thought the original opening standards were fair and balanced. The 25% we did not support, and we were very vocal about that because we'd seen in other states that tried to open at 25%, up to 70% of the restaurants never reopened because of that until they went to 50%. Very few states, 2 states in the country, have more restrictions on restaurants than Pennsylvania. That would be New Jersey and California. I just think we need to get back to 50%. I'm sure that the team over there is, the governor's office is considering that and trying to figure out a way to get there.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on, and the best of luck to all of you in the restaurant industry, and hopefully things will get back to normal as soon as possible.
Thanks for having me on, Terry. Great to be with you today.
All right, coming up, the presidential election in Pennsylvania. Yes, there is a presidential election, and yes, the candidates are flooding into our state. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
The presidential election in the state of Pennsylvania. Joining me is John Cole. He's the managing editor of PoliticsPA. I'll tell you, John, the candidates and the surrogates are flooding into the state. It's almost like every day. I'm exaggerating, but certainly several times a week. The candidates, the surrogates are in the state of Pennsylvania. Again, no doubt about the significance of Pennsylvania. It's probably one of 6 states likely to determine the next president of the United States.
Absolutely. And Terry, don't expect it to stop soon with the surrogates and the candidates themselves making visits to the state. As we're less than 100 days away from the presidential election, both campaigns have made a specific importance of winning the state of Pennsylvania. Now, due to the coronavirus pandemic, campaigning, as we know, it has changed a bit in the state. There have been less in-person events, but there have been virtual rallies and virtual visits as well. Just to quickly touch on a couple of the biggest names as of late to come through the Commonwealth would be Vice President Mike Pence held 2 visits. He had 2 events in Western PA. He was in Westmoreland County headlining a Cops for Trump event, and he also went to Somerset County to participate in a roundtable discussion about reopening the economy after the coronavirus pandemic. President Donald Trump himself held a, quote, tele-rally in Pennsylvania this past weekend as well, talking about Pennsylvania-centric issues for the presidential election. And then going on to the Democratic side, former Vice President Joe Biden made a visit to the state last in person early July. He was back near his home in Lackawanna County talking about the economy. And then more recently, his spouse, Dr. Joe Biden, and Senator Bob Casey held a discussion. It was a virtual roundtable discussion in Pittsburgh, talking about reopening schools as we get closer and closer to that, which is an important issue as well. And again, they're just the big names. There are plenty of other surrogates that are in and out of the state constantly. And again, don't expect to stop anytime soon.
I'll tell you, if they continue this, they'll pick up residency. They're here so often, they'll become residents of the state. All right, the other thing going on is that President Obama has made endorsements, and not just for statewide office and Congress, but even down into state legislative races. I don't remember a presidential candidate or a former president going through a huge list of state lawmakers to endorse, to tell you the significance of this election for control of the state legislature as well as statewide offices.
Absolutely. So former President Barack Obama released his first wave of endorsements for the 2020 cycle. He made a total of 118 endorsements across the whole nation, that in 17 states specifically. Pennsylvania alone, he endorsed 21 Democrats, which is very significant, making Pennsylvania tie for the second most candidates endorsed for all the endorsements that he released in this first wave. The only state that he endorsed more Democrats in was Texas, where he endorsed 27 candidates there. He endorsed 21 in PA and 21 in North Carolina. He endorsed 3 of the statewide Democrats in Pennsylvania, meaning Attorney General, Treasurer, and Auditor General. He endorsed 4 candidates for Congress, 2 of them being challengers, 2 of them being incumbents. And then the state legislator, like you mentioned, Terry, he endorsed 9 for the state House and 5 for the state Senate. Really really shows you that the former president is investing not just the top races in the state. Of course, he's going to assist former Vice President Joe Biden's effort of winning the state back, but it's also that they're getting into state legislative races. It's really significant.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think we're going to see the former president in the state come the fall, doing extensive campaigning in the state for his former vice president. I think you would agree with that.
Absolutely. I think both campaigns are heavily invested in the state. President Barack Obama carried Pennsylvania twice, don't forget. So I imagine that he's going to make it a point to hold some in-person events if possible. If not, there will be virtual events. I'm sure that Obama will be involved in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Now, Senator Casey also has taken a position with the National Democratic Party in which you expect him not just to be involved in Pennsylvania, but perhaps to be involved nationally. And he and Joe Biden have known each other for decades. He early on endorsed Vice President Biden. And I say this, I won't say more importantly, but they're both from Scranton. They're both born in Scranton, PA. Biden left when he was 10. Senator Casey obviously still lives there.
Absolutely. So Senator Bob Casey was named one of the 8 vice chairs for the Democratic National Convention coming up. And it's noteworthy considering that it shows that how important they view the state of Pennsylvania. And Senator Bob Casey and former Vice President Joe Biden do have that Scranton connection in common. But don't forget, just because not only do they have the town ties with each other, Senator Casey endorsed former Vice President Joe Biden in the Democratic primary quite literally minutes after Biden made the official announcement. He was basically Pennsylvania's first big endorsement that he secured. So when Biden jumped in the race and Senator Casey provided that endorsement right away, it showed that he was committed early on, and Senator Casey seems very much committed to helping former Vice President Joe Biden win the state. And specifically that Scranton region is going to be important coming up.
All right. I want to thank you for coming on. Great update. We'll see you soon. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.